Pat Leonard, our good friend from the New York Daily News, covers the Giants. The draft is a week from today. And Pat Leonard joins us a week from tomorrow. What is today? Wednesday.
You know what?
I'm really ahead of myself.
I felt Thursday all day,
too. I wish it was Friday. But it's not. It's only Wednesday. And Pat Leonard, the days have got to be running together for Leonard, who's got to be tired of running these NFL draft previews and speculation and everything else about what's going to happen with the Big Blue with that number 2 overall pick on Thursday, a week from tomorrow. Good morning, Pat Leonard.
Good morning, gentlemen. Yeah, you're right. I don't know what day of the week it is, and I don't know who I'm going to write about after the draft. I feel like we've covered it all already. You got like 70 quarterbacks, a top running back, a top DN, a top offensive lineman. There's just so much to talk about. Giants and Jets 2 and 3. It's crazy.
Do you think, Pat, and I'll ask you your personal opinion on this, what you think they'll do. Do you think the Giants know what they're doing right now?
No, I think they have a strong idea of what they want to do, but I don't think they've made a decision yet as far as, I think Dave Gettleman is smart enough and seasoned enough that he's aware that if a trade offer comes in that's too good to be true, he would be willing to make it. I'm sure, they've evaluated a lot of players, so just because they have guys like Saquon Barkley and Bradley Chubb at the top of their board doesn't mean that, there isn't going to be an internal discussion about what direction they go in and whether they ultimately steer clear of a quarterback. My feeling, though, is that they're close to knowing what they intend to do, and that if they understand what the Browns are doing at 1, which I think is Sam Darnold, I really do believe Saquon Barkley is the pick at 2, and that's my prediction if I had to make one of where they're going. And the reason is, I think Dave Gettleman being GM is a major important factor here. I think you have to remember this guy is a lifelong scout. He evaluates his film. He's wanted this job his whole life. He wants to turn the Giants around right now and win. They want to take advantage of Eli Manning's last couple or few years. I think so much, including the fact that they really don't have a top flight running back on their roster. I think it all just points to the Penn State running back Barkley at 2. There's just too many factors that point that way to me.
I would love the pick. I must tell you, I'm a Penn State guy, but I would love the pick. I think he'd be phenomenal for the Giants. And then that must mean, Pat, right, that if they go in that direction, Darnold goes 1, that they're not. None of the other quarterbacks reach out to them and go, boy, you've got to take me because I'm going to lead you to a Super Bowl in a couple of years. And it almost also means that they do like Eli Manning still for a couple of more years. And does it also mean they like a Davis Webb as a backup?
I think it means more about what they feel about Eli than Webb. I do think they really wish that they had tape on Webb in a game so that they could just with more conviction, I think, make a decision on that one way or another. But I honestly don't think that's affecting them here. Like, if there were a quarterback that were so good that they couldn't pass him up at 2, no matter what their quarterback situation was on the Giants, I think they would take him. But I think it's telling, an analyst was telling me this last week. It's interesting that, you look at these quarterbacks, they all have potential, but if there were one that were so clearly that guy to take you to a Super Bowl, there wouldn't even be a question about who the Browns were taking at 1. So the idea that there's still debate about what the Browns should do at 1 is proof that all of these quarterbacks have different strengths, different flaws, and that everyone has a different opinion. And so I think that strengthens the argument that the Giants at 2 can't, with strong enough conviction, say that there's a guy there that's a sure thing who really looks like that can't miss prospect. I actually think the quarterback to take that I would take if I were taking one would be Rosen. But I know everyone seems very high on Darnold. And I agree that if the Giants somehow did go quarterback, which I don't think they're going to, but if they did, that Darnold and Allen seem to have the demeanors and kind of the head down and do your work personalities that seem to be important to this general manager and head coach.
Pat Leonard with us here on Big Board Sports 104.5. The team, ESPN Radio, covers the Giants for the New York Daily News and also SNY, and find him on Twitter at PLeonardNYDN. Pat, you answered part of my first question there, but I'll ask it anyway and see what comes up here. If the Browns pass on Darnold, and let's say they take Allen or Rosen, doesn't matter to me in this scenario, but if Darnold is on the board too, do you think that changes the Giants' plan of maybe taking Barkley? And then secondly, is there a trade offer out there that the Giants would consider moving out of to?
Okay, so the Darnold question, I think that is an interesting hypothetical. I really don't think that's going to happen. I don't believe that the Browns at 1 are going, because they have Tyrod Taylor for a year, but I think they need the guy that they pick to be as close to a sure thing as possible. And I think while Josh Allen has a very high ceiling and a lot of exciting upside, I don't think he played well enough and at a high enough level at Wyoming and has too many flaws. Like, to me, they're taking a quarterback that's going to be ready in 2019, and I think Darnold has a way better chance of that than Allen. Though, if they don't take him, I do think it could change the equation for the Giants at 2. I agree that he fits the mold of the type of guy that they would love to have as a quarterback. I selfishly would love to cover a guy like Mayfield or Rosen. They'd be much more interesting on a daily basis. But no, I do think that Darnold could change the equation if he falls to 2. As far as a trade, my hunch is that they will not trade out of it. That doesn't mean it won't happen. I definitely think they're keeping their ears and eyes open. But number one, I strongly do not believe that John Mara and the Giants, after going 3-13, are going to trade out of really the only reward for having that embarrassing season, which is a number 2 pick to take an elite player. I don't think they're going to leave that. If they do, I don't really see them trading much more than a couple picks down, like 5 or 6 at the furthest, and still staying within line to get like a Quentin Nelson or a Chubb. But I don't think you're getting Chubb if you're there. I really do think, I can't stress this enough, that the most important. I was talking to Ernie Accorsi about this last night. He was doing like a sit down at Foley's in New York with Gary Myers and Rich Cimini, and he knows Dave Gettleman about as well as anyone. And I think he's in agreement in general on the fact that Dave Gettleman being the GM here matters. His preference, his experience, and the trust that he and his conviction in the types of players he scouts. And if you're listening now, I know we all are listening to all this chatter on a daily basis, but what I've been writing about for about a month and a half about Barkley and just how strong a prospect he is and how much the Giants like him, it sounds like it's starting to be, it's no longer a secret now that everyone understands now that the Giants, truthfully, at number 2, are looking for a guy that they feel has no weaknesses. And Barkley is the closest thing to that in that draft, above the quarterbacks and maybe even above Chubb.
Pat Leonard, New York Daily News, with us here on Big Board Sports 104.5 The Team, ESPN Radio. Look, I think when it's all said and done, Odell Beckham Jr. is a Giant this year. They're not trading him. My question is he getting a new contract, or when is he getting the new contract?
That's a great question. Are they not trading him? Is that true?
I think, you know what, Pat? When he showed up on that first day, I think that set everything in a different direction.
I think you're totally right. And I think it was a combination of Beckham doing that and the fact that it really sounds like teams were reluctant to match the Giants' asking price, and that, I believed from my reporting, and there were others too, I know, like Adam Schefter, who were basically predicting that the Giants were eventually going to settle on a first-round pick and maybe like a second or a third in a Beckham deal. But whether teams weren't offering high enough firsts, or whether the Giants, it sounds, really stuck to 2 firsts, and then teams were unwilling to go there. But your question about whether they'll pay them, I'm actually working on a story right now. It's going to go on our website in about a half hour, our Daily News website. They might pay Beckham, but $20 million, which is his reporting asking price, is not reasonable. In fact, I've talked to cap experts and agents who believe that even $18 million, you're talking about quarterback money. And so that's kind of why it all came to a head here too, is because the issue here is the Giants were between a rock and a hard place between signing him to this lucrative extension, or, because he doesn't want to play unless he has a new deal, or figuring out an alternative scenario. Beckham, of course, could try and hold out, but they're in a tough spot here. My understanding is that Beckham still does not intend to play on the final year of his contract. I didn't know what to make of Jarvis Landry's comment yesterday in Cleveland that Beckham would definitely be a Giant for another year. I don't know if that clarifies the situation. It just confuses me further. The bottom line is I think that they need to get something done in this next week and a half with Odell, and it's going to require some movement around the roster, too, with some cap space. I think they just need to get something done before the draft, because after the draft, then Beckham's leverage really goes down, because then teams don't have their draft picks anymore as ammunition to maybe make a trade. But the shorter answer is that the Giants and Beckham both want him to continue to be a Giant, and Pat Shurmur's got to be the happiest guy here that Odell showed up that Monday. But it still isn't. We might be on the doorstep of a contract. I think they should be, and I think they need to be. But if they don't get it done soon, it could get ugly before it gets better again.
Yeah, because Odell wants to make more than Antonio Brown, right? Antonio Brown was
right, and he makes $17 a year.
Right, yeah. He's 7, so he's going to go. Hey, right now, Antonio Brown's the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL at $17 million a year. I want to be higher than 17, so you got to get me to 18.
Well, that's the question too. Is the contract that I worked with guy Zach Moore from OverTheCap.com, and he came up with a contract that he thought was reasonable for Club and Beckham, and it only pays him $17.2 million a year, but it gives him a lot of measurables, including $200,000 a year higher than Brown. So it technically makes him higher paid than Brown, but it's nowhere near that $20 million number that we've heard that he wants.
Yeah.
So the question is that good enough? Or does something like that work for him? Because if it does, then maybe that does work for the Giants. But if he wants something closer to $20 million, then where are we headed?
Yeah, and I think with John Mara and knowing the Giants, I think that may be out of the ballpark.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hey, Pat.
Yeah, I think it'll be very tough for them to spend that money. And this is a longer conversation, but Eli Manning makes a lot of money, and it's hard to pay a receiver and a quarterback 20% of your cap space and still contend for a Super Bowl when you have to build an entire roster.
Pat, congrats on signing that baseball at Foley's last night, man. I saw your tweet, and that is that's a great pub near the Empire State Building in New York. That's cool.
That was awesome. I told Sean when he asked me to sign it. I really meant it. I was like, yeah, when I was a kid, man, I used to practice this. I used to hope someone would ask for my autograph not let alone on a baseball one day. This is a dream come true. So that was really cool.
Yeah, Foley's is a cool spot if you're in New York, and it's an Irish American bar, but it's got baseballs signed all over the place. Very cool.
You're the man, Pat. We appreciate everything you do for us on our show and the relationship that we have, and I'm sure we're going to reach out a lot more times down the road here as the draft gets ready to roll next week.
Yeah, let's talk after they take Saquon. After the draft.
Love it. You can't say that enough.
Pat.
You can't say it enough, Pat. Keep it rolling, my man. See you, Pat. Thanks for a few minutes.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Pat Leonard, New York Daily News, and he is on board with if he's to give his opinion and weigh in right now, tomorrow, a week out from the draft, he thinks Big Blue will be taking Saquon Barkley with the second overall pick on Thursday night.